Welcome to the Novigo's third lecture on SAP Transportation Management practice course. In this lecture, we cover transportation planning. So far, we've covered the first step or the first component of SAP Transportation Management. We saw how we can receive orders from customers into SAP ERP or directly into our SAP TM. We discussed what is OTR and what is DTR. Then we saw how we can convert all transportation requirements, including OTR, DTR, and forwarding order to freight units using freight unit building rule. The purpose of this lecture is to cover the transportation planning component of SAP TM. By the end of this lecture, you will be familiar with the most important objects, their definition, and their interaction within transportation planning. You will be familiar with resources, schedules, and transportation networks. You will learn about freight order and freight booking. And you will learn about the usage of optimizer. This is the scenario which we work on throughout our course. Our company produces and exports chemical products. We build containers on our plant and send them overseas to our customers. In this scenario, our goal is to send those containers to the port of discharge. In order to do that, we have two options. We can use port of loading 1 or port of loading 2. We choose the port of loading while we are in the planning stage and by considering the schedules. We talk about schedules later on in this course. As you can see, our transportation network has two stages. Stage 1 or pre-carriage, which is a road leg and will be done by trucks, and stage 2 or main carriage, which is an ocean leg and will be done with ships. This flowchart belongs to the transportation planning phase of SAP TM. I'm going to talk about each of these objects in more detail in next slides. The result of the previous step in SAP TM was freight unit. Now our intention is to plan these freight units. There are two options: one, manual transportation planning, and optimized transportation planning. In order to do the optimized transportation planning, we use a tool called Optimizer. SCM Optimizer is an external engine used to optimize scenarios related to production planning, transportation, as well as generic solving of linear problems. To do planning, some factors need to be considered. The first one is resources. A machine, means of transportation, or other asset with a limited capacity that fulfills a particular function in the supply chain. Examples are truck, containers, and cranes. The next factor is network. Combination of location, transportation zones, and transportation lanes. The last factor which we need to consider is schedule. A sequence of stops with related recurring departure and arrival times that is valid for specific time period. Here you can see the transportation cockpit. We use transportation cockpit to do our planning activities. My transportation cockpit is made of 4 quadrants. The first quadrant over here is freight unit stages. We can see the list of our freight units in this quadrant. The first column over here is items, which tells you what your freight unit is made of. In my case, my freight units are made of containers. Also, you can find some other information such as original order number, execution document, the delivery number, stage. As you know, our scenario has 2 stages, one pre-carriage and one main carriage. Planning status, loading location, unloading location, earliest requested date, latest requested date, and weight. The next quadrant which I'm going to explore contains my resources and my schedules. I only have one resource, which is a truck resource, and you can see it over here. I have 2 schedules which I can use. They belong to 2 separate carriers. They departure from a different source location, but their destination location is the same. Also, you can see the stop sequence, source location address, and destination location address in the other columns. If I expand the schedules, you can see that each schedule is consist of voyages. Voyages have fixed departure and arrival date. Some information that you can find here are source location and destination location for each voyage, cargo cutoff date, documentation cutoff date, availability date, and voyage or train number. In this quadrant, you can find your freight booking and freight orders. Of course, in order to have freight orders and freight booking, you need to plan your freight units. We haven't done that yet. And here you can see the overview, the stages, allocation, and charges of your planning activities. We have not yet planned our freight units. That's why these two quadrants are empty. Now let's start our planning activities by manually planning our second stage, or the ocean leg. In order to do that, we have to choose a voyage which fits our transportation requirement, meaning that the arrival date shouldn't be after the deadline or after the latest requested date, and also it shouldn't be long before the latest requested date. So let's first explore the second schedule. Here are the voyages and here are the arrival dates. The first arrival date for this voyage is October 26. The next one is November 2nd. Next one is November 10, November 17, November 24, and December 1st. Now let's take a look at our first schedule. The arrival dates are October 31st, November 7, November 15, November 22nd, and November 29, which is exactly our latest requested date. So we choose this voyage and we create a freight document. We put down the number of containers that we need. As you can see, we have created a freight booking. Now all we have to do is to drag and drop the freight units into this freight booking. Let's assume our company doesn't like to plan the freight units without delivery document. Let's plan those which has already been delivered. So the planning has been done. As you can see, these three freight units have execution document which is the same number, which has the same number as the freight booking document number. Now I would like to plan my first stage by doing an optimized planning. Let's change the view to see the freight units belong to the first stage. Here are my freight units. All I have to do is to select those freight units and ask SAP to plan them with all resources using Optimizer. As you can see, the freight units has been planned. This is the execution document number. 3 freight orders has been created, and as you can see, the system has automatically used the truck resource that we have in order to create these freight orders. We are going to talk about freight bookings and freight orders in more detail later on next slides and next videos. The result of transportation planning are objects called freight order and freight booking. Let's first take a look at their definition. Freight order, an order whose execution is planned by a carrier or the shipper. The order contains the plan for the logistical processing and execution data. Freight booking, an order providing transportation capacity whose execution is planned by a carrier. The freight booking contains the plan for the logistical processing. As you can see, their definition is pretty much the same. The major difference between freight order and freight booking is the mode of transportation. Basically, if we use planes and ships for our transportation, we call that object freight booking. If we use trucks and trains, we call it freight order. As you can see, we can also have the carrier selection while creating freight orders and freight bookings. If we do this, there is no need for doing tendering and subcontracting on next steps. While doing carrier selection, the system takes some factors like carrier profile and carrier allocation into account. Now let's take a look at the freight orders and the freight booking which we created in our system. Let's start with freight order. Freight order, like other documents, has several tabs. Each of them contains specific kind of information. We start with general information, document type, transportation mode, means of transport. The carrier information, we have not yet assigned the carrier, the total distance, total duration, which is 30 minutes, the capacity of the resource. So our truck had the capacity of 25 tons. The organizational data, here we can see our purchasing organization and the cargo information. So the cargo weight was 25 tons. The resource capacity was also 25 tons. That's why the utilization is 100%. The next tabs which we can take a look are business partners, carrier, shipper, consignee, executing carrier, and communication party. Carrier has not yet been assigned. We can see the items tab. In the items tab, we can see the hierarchy of material in our freight order. Our material, which is phenol, is inside a container, and our container has been placed in our truck. The quantity, the unit of measure, the weight, and other information which you can find. Stages. In the stages tab, we can see the source location and the destination location, the distance, duration, and the dates regarding transportation. And subcontracting tab, it is totally empty at the moment because we haven't yet assigned the carrier yet. Document flow. In the document flow, again, you can see the hierarchy of documents. Freight order has been created based on the freight unit document, and freight unit, as you know, has been created based on the DTR and OTR documents. Charges, also it is 0 at the moment. The charges will be populated when we assign the carrier to our freight order. Now let's take a look at our freight booking. In the general data, tab you can find information such as carrier, and as I've explained earlier, since schedules are defined for each carrier and we use a specific schedule, the carrier has already been assigned for this freight booking. The container count, 3 pieces, the voyage which we used, and the schedule number which we used, the consignee, and the purchasing organization. Locations and dates, this is the port of loading and port of discharge with the respected dates of each. Stages, we only have one stage for this freight booking. Items, here you can see our 3 containers over here. Each of them consists of material in them, and the gross weight is 25 tons. And document flow tab, we can again see the hierarchy of documents. Here we have our freight booking type, which has been made by 3 freight units. The predecessor business documents are freight units, and as you already know, freight units are created based on DTR, OTR, and the delivery and sales document. We also have the charges tab. In the case of freight booking, since we already have our carrier assigned, we can calculate the charges. So the total charge is here, you can find it here. You can see the detail about the charge calculation over here. So there are 4 line items, 3 weight charges and 1 mileage charge. Since we have 3 containers, we have 3 weight charges and 1 mileage charge, which has been calculated based on the distance between port of loading and port of discharge. And the last tab which I would like to show you is the cost distribution. In this tab you can see how cost has been distributed on different items. As you can see, 33.3% is for the phenol and 66.6% is for the acetone. Now if I expand this freight order, you can see the charges for each of them, and you can do your charges analysis with this tab to understand how much money has been spent for each of these items. I have prepared some exercises based on the lecture we just went through. Exercise number 1. What is carrier allocation? Exercise number 2. What are advantages of using optimizer while planning our freight units? Exercise number 3. Do some research about the terms mentioned below. What purpose do they serve? LTL, FTL, and parcel. In this slide, you can see the answers for those questions.